I have a long-running fascination with beautiful things in games. Whether that is the design of the world itself, the landscapes stretching across my monitor and promising new adventures on the horizon, or all of the little things in between, like art and clothing that help to tell you part of the story. Along with that, I always pay special attention to the design of the inhabitants of any given world. Their individual features, their hair, if they wear makeup, how they physically carry themselves. In the context of a world like what we have in World of Warcraft or in Azeroth, where you have so many different races with their own unique cultures and societies, have you ever stopped to ask, what are the particular beauty standards that each of these races are held to? What is it that these people find beautiful? This can be in the sense of what each race finds individually attractive, and therefore what are the most common traits that you will spot all across the board, as well as what each person from a particular race would desire for themselves. What do they look up to? Who do they model after in order to achieve a particular beauty standard for their own internal happiness? Today I want to discuss beauty standards in Azeroth, and I want to take a look at this from a few different angles. We're going to explore it, first of all, against the backdrop of our real-life beauty standards at the time of WoW's creation, then the perspective of real players and how they interpreted beauty in this world, as well as what I have personally observed to be canon to the in-game universe somewhat in terms of beauty standards. But before we get started, I just want to say that in my opinion, a person's mind is the biggest thing that makes them beautiful. And in the spirit of nurturing your mind and always working to be a better version of yourself, I would like to happily recommend Brilliant to you guys. If you're unfamiliar with it, Brilliant is a platform that allows you to train your mind and problem-solving skills, helping you to become a better thinker with thousands of visual, interactive lessons in math, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. Just like you have daily habits to take care of your body, Brilliant can help you acquire new habits to do the same for your mind. Even learning a little every day can take you a long way in terms of reaching your personal and serious professional goals. It's convenient because you're able to access all of the hands-on lessons that Brilliant has to offer on the go with your phone. So your habits don't have to be broken by a busy schedule or just because you're not at home. Brilliant can also help you attain a healthier attitude towards certain concepts, maybe things that perhaps you avoided because you just couldn't see their real-life application. Math is definitely one such concept that gets this treatment across the board where people are like, where am I going to use this in real life? Brilliant, with the help of real industry professionals and university professors, have built mathematical courses that focus on just that, their real-life practicality, how they are applicable in your personal growth and career. They do of course cover a full range of subjects that perhaps you would have thought unattainable for yourself outside of a university setting. For example, cutting-edge topics such as AI with courses in logic and how AI generally works. If you're interested in nurturing your own beautiful mind and you would like to try out everything that Brilliant has to offer for free, you can go to brilliant.org/Angelikatosh, you can scan the QR code on screen, or you can just follow the link down in my description below. My viewers are also getting a 20% off a premium subscription, which will give you unlimited daily access to everything that's on Brilliant. Thank you once again, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video. Now back to beautiful people in Azeroth, I thought that we would get the most out of this discussion by focusing on the races as they are up to the Burning Crusade expansion. As it stands, the retail or most up-to-date version of Azeroth features many new races and sub-races, or I believe they're called allied races, and I feel that a lot of the aesthetic kind of went from that Warcraft look into the more generic territories, and what I'm really interested in is precisely that, the Warcraft look, with its specific Warcraft 3 roots and how it was worked into the MMO. And with that, I would like to take you guys back to the early 2000s. 2004 was the year World of Warcraft came out, and we got to know the first 8 playable races. The humans, night elves, dwarves, and gnomes on the Alliance, and then the orcs, undead, tauren, and trolls on the Horde. Looking at these races from a wide lens, there's not a whole lot of connection that you could make to our real life from the get-go, other than obviously the more human-looking races like the humans and the dwarves looking like us and being most relatable. But when you focus in on the finer details, you do start to see some of these influences. Focusing specifically on the female characters, even just from the first original 8 races. It might seem subtle at first, but In reality, across all the races, they're quite heavy on the eye makeup, particularly with black eyeliner and a lot of eyeshadow. The lips are quite defined with different color lipsticks, they mostly have quite thin eyebrows, and the faces as a whole have a sort of a frosty appearance to them, kind of a glow, especially under the eyes. Notice that a lot of the lipsticks kind of have that frosty or glowy effect to them as well. It's like the specific shine. Upon even closer inspection, I believe that this is all very closely resembling makeup trends from the time. If you look at how celebrities did their makeup in the early 2000s, you'll start to see a lot of what we have observed in WoW. The dark eyeliner, especially on the waterline, and the different colored eyeshadows. Thin eyebrows were generally the desired look at the time, and then you have that frosty glow that I talked about with the faces. Like, there's a sort of shine to them that you don't really see in today's makeup trends. I feel like today it's more popular to have like this natural dewy glow, whereas in the early 2000s they were very much about like the glam and exaggerated look. And finally, the lips. They were quite defined, and I know that I've used that word a lot now, but it's hard to describe it as anything other than frosty, kind of cold looking shine on the lips that, again, isn't quite as popular today, but you would see it quite a lot back then. I definitely think that the original artists that worked on creating these races in WoW did a fantastic job with making this a really subtle thing that you'd really have to look at and compare to the trends of the time to understand the inspiration. And that's sort of what gives it that timeless look as well, the fact that it isn't so obvious. It doesn't take you out of the fantasy, and at the same time you're drawn to them in a way that maybe you don't realize. It's something familiar, it's attractive, and stands out, but again, timeless. And now I want to give special attention to the Blood Elf females. These were the epitome of early 2000s beauty. The actual Paris Hiltons and Britney Spears of Azeroth. And they were a lot more obvious with it too. Everything about them, the makeup, and especially the hair, which had this almost obviously not their natural color kind of look about them, but I guess it would be their natural color, which makes them like even more magical. It's like this really vibrant and exaggerated tint to their hair. And strangely, I think that it worked really well for them, even in the context of such a fantasy world. It's interesting that originally, the alpha version of Blood Elves, or the High Elves as we saw them in vanilla, were maybe a bit more natural with their hair colors, though still very heavy on the makeup, but I do feel that they were a lot less obvious with those influences that we talked about. And then for TBC, they really decided to adopt that aesthetic. It's no mistake that there's a Paris Hilton or Harris Pilton NPC in WoW either. Even their nails are painted, unlike other races. The developers didn't make everybody look so generic though, and that's what I really appreciate about World of Warcraft, especially for the races where you're kind of expecting them to have a more rough around the edges look. They certainly deliver, but at the same time, each of those races has that one pretty face, which I think is meant to be closest to human and a sort of a youthful complexion where they do implement the trends of the time. They kind of give a relatable touch to every single race, so it's not just all of those kind of rough faces for everybody. Perhaps subtly trying to give the Horde even more of an appeal. With some races, of course, like the Night Elves or the humans, they were very obviously adhering to what we would see as conventionally attractive beauty standards, but in races where they couldn't do it all the time or it would look silly, they had other things that would instead hint to the sorts of standards that a particular race would have. I think that the individual races' dances are a great example of that. Like, for example, troll females. The very word troll, or saying that someone looks like a troll, has very negative connotations around it. It kind of already insinuates that you're not really attractive. But then you look at the dance for the female trolls, and it's taken from the Shakira Whenever, Wherever music video. So where they maybe couldn't apply a traditional beauty standard, they gave them the moves. Their hips certainly don't lie. And, you know, when you're talking about one of the most attractive pop singers of the time, it's a very interesting comparison, and it's very interesting that they tied them in with female trolls to give them that bit of femininity and kind of a more conventional turn as well, for a race that's meant to be more kind of rough. I keep using that word, but you understand what I mean. I always thought that the undead females were a very interesting example of this as well. A race that is literally a dead, decaying corpse has these really sensual dance moves inspired by one of the most beautiful dances in the world, belly dancing. In general, and in line with the standards of the time, I think that all of the female characters were designed to be quite feminine and taking inspiration from the real world, but also making it their own. As for male characters, for how different all the races are, in general, they all do have this very masculine look to them. They're generally very fit, strong arms, they've got symmetrical faces, a real medieval hero kind of look about them with the longer hair, and I'd say that there's actually quite a lot of Lord of the Rings inspiration instead of just real-life actors or singers inspiration. It looks like the male characters took more inspiration from fantasy movies in the early 2000s than, again, real-life trends like the female characters did. And perhaps in the creation of the races, the developers thought that these are just things that either gender would most relate to. Again, keep in mind, 2004 people. Male blood elves are very interesting to look at here because they're definitely an outlier. I think that they're the more feminine out of all of the races. They still have a sort of a masculine look to them, but more so in an early 2000s soft boy singer aesthetic. I do think there is quite a bit of Legolas in there too, but for the most part, the rest of the races are these sort of big, bulky guys, and if they're not bulky, there's a focus on something else to make the race stand out. But then you've got the Blood Elves, which are quite obviously with symmetrical faces, beautiful hair, so again, a bit of an outlier and certainly something different for the Horde. And talking about dances again, like the male trolls had this Brazilian martial arts inspired dance, so I guess in terms of what's attractive there, you could say it's that they're very agile, they've got a lot of upper body strength, even if they're not as bulky or muscular as the other races. The undead male dance is this sort of rocking out to heavy metal vibe, and they are one of the things that really explain why World of Warcraft always had such a universal appeal. Whatever your personal vibe or aesthetic, it seemed that World of Warcraft had a little bit of everything for everyone. To me, the undead males kind of represented that new metal look from the early 2000s. They were forged to the sound of Linkin Park. Really, their hairstyles and everything is also like super representative of that. But again, all of the things that we've just looked at here are solely focusing on the developer side of things, the artists and their own vision and inspiration when it came to designing the races. The next thing that I want to focus on is how actual players interpreted beauty in this world. So when it comes to the concept of beauty standards, generally it's a desirable thing to be considered beautiful or attractive. People want to adhere to these standards to fit in, to be liked, to find love, or sometimes just because they want to feel beautiful themselves and they think that that is the best way to achieve that. World of Warcraft is obviously an online game. This means that to an extent, people may create their character based on what they feel will be most attractive to other players that are out there. Depending on how you play, it's different for everybody, but a lot of people see their in-game avatar as an extension of themselves, and therefore they look for the best representation of that to interact with the world and other players. Time and time again, through player senses and other things like simply playing the game and seeing what's out there, we can observe that the most popular races are the Blood Elves, the Night Elves, and humans. And even today, with the introduction of all these new races and sub-races, this is still true. In a Reddit post from 6 years ago, there was a very interesting ranking of what was popular in terms of race, gender, and class at the time. At that point, Night Elf female druids were the top choice, followed by human male paladins as the second choice. At this point also, Blood Elf male and female paladins appeared just below male taurens, which is interesting, but still in the top 10. For this, let's just ignore all of the allied races for a minute and focus just on the core 8 races from TBC. Near the bottom of the rankings, you'll see a lot of troll, orc, dwarf, and tauren females. Specifically females. The male variants of these races seem to be a lot more popular as a whole. And it's true, where you see a ton of male orcs, for example, where do you ever see female orcs? I will speak from personal experience also, but it is true that these are the races that I least see when it comes to female characters. And I've just mentioned it, but really, female orcs are total unicorns for me. I feel like I never see them. But I will admit, I personally also never play them. I myself don't feel particularly drawn to them, and if I do play those races, I actually prefer playing the male variants. Like, one of my favorite characters to play is an undead male, but with undead females, I just never feel the connection. Like, if I ever play as an undead female, it just feels kind of wrong. And it's just that, they don't appeal to me, and I think that that's the case for a lot of people. And as much as perhaps we might hate to say it, I do feel that this is very closely related to beauty standards and what players actually find beautiful. It's no coincidence that the most conventionally attractive races in World of Warcraft are the most played races. For the rest of the races, however, it's not to say that they're not beautiful in the context of their own world, however. And this is where we come to the part of the video where I will be looking at beauty standards as I believe the people of Azeroth understand them, without our real-world intervention. This will apply to most of the races, but I think that there's beauty in simplicity. Honestly, there is nothing otherworldly about almost all of these races, and I think that that's what makes them beautiful. They have a very ordinary appearance. Pretty for sure, symmetrical faces, physically fit, but their physical appearances are not exaggerated or blown out of proportion. They do look, for the most part, like regular people, and again, that is the beauty of it. They live regular lives, they fall in love, they work hard. And you do have the outliers like the Night Elves and the Blood Elves who are meant to be beautiful in a way that's almost magical and I guess in a way unattainable. But we'll get to that in a second. What I love about WoW is that not every race has to have this specific type of look for female characters for them to be considered feminine and beautiful in their own race. Beauty and femininity can vary across the different cultures. In some cases, they value physical strength more and they find it more attractive. In other cases, I wager they look for wisdom as a general standard or one's spirituality and connection with nature. Where physical beauty does play a factor, I think that it's explored in a very interesting way, like depictions of women in art, or the way in which nobility dresses and looks, so you can see that there is something that perhaps the other more regular inhabitants have to model after. Every race thrives in their own society and culture. They find beauty in themselves, they fall in love, they marry, and they have children. The beauty standard in Azeroth is not just Night Elf or Blood Elf. Even they have their own traits and things to look for within their own societies, as does every other race in Azeroth. Sure, the argument of the Night Elven physical beauty is obvious, and we can see that in even the beautiful clothing that accentuates their tall, slim figures. That's a big part of it, but their connection to nature and their spirituality is arguably a more spoken about and important feature. Their wisdom, their devotion to Elune, all things that I believe they actually value above the physical. You'll see that some races have a lot of piercings and jewelry, like the Blood Elves, Orcs, humans. The Night Elves, for example, don't seem to wear any jewelry. Trolls, for example, have tusks and they wear face paint. The way they do their hair also really stands out. I would guess that for a Tauren, a well-groomed mane and coat is rather important. But on a deeper level, again, wisdom, spirituality, but also the ability to hold your own. Protect your home, regardless of your gender. Gnomes are a whimsical race who I think like to stand out from the crowd, even though they're quite small. Brightly colored hair and a sharp mind, the ability to innovate, really seem like things that I would most associate with their race, and therefore I think that those are the things that they would find beautiful. Again, it's no mistake that a lot of them strive to be engineers and intellectuals in that sort of way. As for dwarves, I would say that their hair is a big part of it. The women have beautiful, thick locks with their naturally vibrant hair colors, and the men have very well-groomed beards. Again, kind of a focus on a really masculine appearance. I debated including Draenei's in this because they're not actually from Azeroth, they're from their own planet, Argus. But if we do look at them, there really is a sort of an alien beauty to them. They stand out because of their unique features like the hooves instead of feet, their tails, their horns, and the tendrils. The fact that they put jewelry on those parts of themselves show that they value those things that make them different from the other races, and so they put a special accent on it instead of hiding it. And this is further proof that other races don't adhere to each other's standards of beauty. Blood elves remind me of high elves from the Elder Scrolls, in that it seems that proficiency in magic, or for example intelligence and authority, are seen as beautiful. We can derive that from the way they speak even. All blood elves seem to have a sort of commanding tone to their voices, as opposed to the calm and breathy voices of the night elves. And I would say that the blood elves perhaps do value physical beauty even more than the night elves do. Orcs value strength and honor. They like a warrior who can hold their own. But really, get you a girl that can do both. We can take that from the way they carry themselves, the way they speak, piercings, facial hair, and their hair does seem to play some part in it, but to a lesser extent, as most of their hairstyles will feature somewhat of a bald head. They can actually strip back all of the typical features and show you that traditional ideas of beauty aren't really the goal here. I think that humans and the undead probably have a lot in common. Well, because the undead used to be humans. Humans in WoW are great in that they are very basic, and we've mentioned this already, how it's a very conventional kind of beauty in terms of both the men and the women, in both traditional and non-traditional gender roles, as there doesn't really seem to be a lot of fuss around that sort of thing in Azeroth anyway. As long as you work hard, you're humble, I would say that's mostly what it takes. I do think just like us, like regular people, they do put some accent and value on their physical beauty, but I do not think that they're always thinking about it or making it the center of their world all the time. Perhaps it's a thing that they take for granted because they have it. The undead, perhaps less so, because their bodies are physically decayed. There is not a lot that can be said for their appearance, or if any kind of beauty standards matter to them now. There are two examples that I can think of where beauty, physical beauty, was a very sore subject for the undead. Blind Mary is one such tragic example. She was once a beautiful woman who fell to the undead in Duskwood, and she found it hard to come to terms with her new appearance. She viewed herself as a monster. For that, she tore out her own eyes so that she wouldn't have to look at herself. The memory of my beauty makes its loss so unbearable. And this is why she is Blind Mary. And I know this is after TBC, but I want to mention this just for the purpose of this video. Lillian Voss. She was the daughter of a high priest, and she was killed just a little bit prior to the events of Cataclysm. She then woke up in Tearsful Glades, and her initial reaction to waking up as her new Forsaken self was visceral. She refused to accept this reality. Even though Lillian later embraces her new self and steps up into a role in the Uncrowned organization, we can see that the undead in general bear a lot of resentment for themselves and this state of being, at least in the very beginning. Their journey as an undead starts with self-hatred, denial, and of course from that we can derive that beauty and the idea of being beautiful is not something that they strive towards, but something that they now mourn. Maybe it's a bit of an indicator as to how the humans perhaps value it a lot more than they think, and they don't know how much they value it until they lose it. And now if we speak a little bit about attraction, of course people fall in love within their own race, but that doesn't always have to be the case. Opposites too can attract, and we've seen evidence of interracial relationships like the famous paladin Turallion and the high elf Illyria Windrunner. Or maybe a more bizarre case, where a succubus mistress, Nagmara, fell in love with a dwarf who rejected her, so she asked adventurers to get a love potion for her. Love isn't confined to the standards of one's individual race in Azeroth, and if I had to guess, at the end of the day, it's more about what the person holds on the inside than what they show on the outside. I really enjoy exploring this side of fantasy worlds because I think that it further pulls you into their existence and makes everything so much more believable and immersive. All that said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What I find beautiful might not be the same as what you perceive in that way, and that's fine too. But I think that we can all agree that Azeroth, in its simplest iterations, is indeed very special and beautiful, in so many ways beyond the look of its inhabitants. It's just fun to focus in on those things sometimes. And that about covers it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, do be sure to leave a like and subscribe, I really appreciate it. As always, big shout out to my channel members, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you all in the next video. Be seeing you, bye!